Now we move to Mr. Ilias Avroeidis, who's a program management officer in charge of governance at the United Nations Environment/Mediterranean Action Plan. And he has a background in chemical engineering. Following up on the same topic that we started with Ms. Addis, where Mr. Ilias is going to be talking to us about the compliance committee as a mechanism for evaluating international commitments and policies and taking the case of the Barcelona Convention. Mr. Ilias, a couple of technical notes. We're going to be sharing your slides from our side to avoid any issues. So whenever you want us to move to the next slides, please say next, and please make...
Merci beaucoup. Thank you very much for the invitation to the Algerian government and to Ms. Samira Hamidi especially. I hope that you can hear me well.
Yes, we do.
You can move to the next slide, please, which is a summary of my presentation. I am going to do a general overview of the UNEP MAP Barcelona Convention system because I'm not sure if the whole audience is aware of it. And then I'm going to provide you with some basics of the defining elements of the work of the Compliance Committee of the Barcelona Convention protocols, including key features of the committee, and some information on the overall findings resulting from the assessment of national implementation reports. I'm really glad also that two members of the committee, Ms. Hamidi and Ms. Addis, are here as well, and the former member also, Mr. Prier. We can move to the next slide, please. Regarding the institutional framework of the UNEP MAP Barcelona Convention system, I think the key element that it's an advanced legal and regulatory framework which covers the essential prerequisites for a healthy Mediterranean Sea coast. The Barcelona Convention is one of the regional peace conventions of the UN Environment Programme, with its 7 protocols. And it also holds a robust institutional framework, which is UNEP MAP, which has a secretariat of the convention and its protocols. And it is the first regional peace program under UNEP. It has a coordinating unit in Athens, Greece, and some MAP components, as you can see. We have the MEDPOL program, which focuses on pollution monitoring and assessment and control, and it's based also in Athens with the coordinating unit. We have the Priorities Action Program in Split, Croatia, which mainly deals with integrated coastal zone management and marine spatial planning. We have REMPEC, who deals with marine pollution from ships, and it's administered by UNEP together with the International Maritime Organization, and it's based in Malta. We have the Information Communication Center Inforac in Rome, Italy. We have our center which deals with issues of spatial protected areas, marine protected areas, and biodiversity, which is based in Tunis. We have the Plan Bleu Regional Activity Center in Marseille, France, which works on environment and development, and it's an observatory dealing with assessment reports, indicators, etc. And finally, we have our Regional Activity Center on Sustainable Consumption and Production in Barcelona, Spain. So beyond this, there is also an implementation framework which underpins the enforcement, working on the provision of science-based assessments, technical guidelines and tools, capacity building, as well as implementation of upscalable projects in priority areas. And our work is funded from the assessed contributions of our contracting parties, as well as from projects, especially from the Global Environment Facility, GEF, and the European Commission. We can move to the next slide now. So the Barcelona Convention was adopted in 1976 and was amended in 1995 to reflect the broader scope following the Rio Conference on Sustainable Development. And it's now the Convention for the Protection of the Marine and the Coastal Environment of the Mediterranean. We have 7 protocols. The protocol for the prevention of dumping from ships and aircraft, the dumping protocol. A protocol concerning cooperation from preventing pollution from ships, especially in cases of emergency. This is the prevention and emergency protocol. We have a protocol for protection of the Mediterranean Sea against pollution from land-based sources and activities, the so-called land-based sources protocol. A protocol concerning specially protected areas and biological diversity in the Mediterranean, the SPA Biodiversity Protocol. A protocol on the protection of the Mediterranean Sea against pollution resulting from the exploration, the exploitation of the continental shelf and the seabed and its subsoil, the offshore protocol. A protocol on the prevention of the Mediterranean, of the pollution of the Mediterranean Sea from transboundary movement of the hazardous waste protocol. And finally, the most recent one, signed in 2008, the protocol on integrated coastal zone management. So this is a robust framework with a convention and a protocol specifying specific issues related to the protection of the pollution, sustainable development of the Mediterranean. The main bodies of the institutional framework, of course, are our contracting parties, which are the 21 countries bordering the Mediterranean, as well as the European Union. And they decide on map policies, strategies, the program of work, the budget, at their ministerial level meetings that are held every 2 years. They appoint focal points to review the progress of work and ensure the implementation of recommendations at the national level. The focal points, the meeting of the contracting parties is every 2 years. This year it will be in December in Antalya, Turkey. And the focal points meeting, which acts as a PrepCom, a preparatory meeting of the COP, takes place in September of the year of the COP, so this September. The compliance committee, to which I'll refer in my presentation, provides recommendations on the implementation of the Barcelona Convention and its protocols, the contracting parties, and finally, a last body is the Mediterranean Commission Sustainable Development. This is an advisory body, a unique body when it was established in 1995, and it involves representatives of the contracting parties, local authorities, NGOs, socioeconomic stakeholders, the scientific community, intergovernmental organizations, as well as experts. And it has a unique feature that both contracting parties and other stakeholders are working on an equal footing. We can move to the next slide now. And before moving in the work on compliance, we need to have an overview here of the legal instruments. You see the convention protocols and their amendments, as well as the status of ratification by the contracting parties. You see that the amendments of the dumping protocol are in gray because it's the only instrument that has not been yet entered into force. It needs one more ratification to enter into force, and this is an opportunity also to extend my an appeal to Algeria as well as to other governments for its ratifications, since I believe that it's important to have all the instruments into force, and of course the contracting party that will ratify it now will take the credit of entering it into force. We can move to the next slide now. Now, to put compliance into context, it has 2 main components. The first one is detection, and the second is effecting. Regarding the detection, this is knowledge about what is happening, information gathering. Effecting refers to means of enforcement in order to change behavior and achieve results, which is modifying behavior. Now, within the Barcelona Convention, how can we gather information on the status of implementation? Speaking about detection, the answer is under Article 26 of the Barcelona Convention, which specifies that this is done through the national implementation reports submitted every 2 years by the contracting parties as a basic mandatory obligation. And on affecting, how can we modify behavior? Through the actions of the Compliance Committee, which is a body of facilitative nature that reports directly to the meeting of the contracting parties, the COP. In short, when it comes to the Compliance Committee, this adopts a persuasive approach under which information, advice, and assistance to the contracting parties are critical tools. We can move to the next slide now, which summarizes the key features of the Compliance Committee. It's functioning under the Barcelona Convention since 2008. It's dedicated to help parties to implement the Convention's protocols, and it establishes a procedure that is not adversarial, transparent, preventive, and non-binding in nature. It takes into account the specific situation of each party, paying particular attention to developing countries. Consider specific situations of actual or potential non-compliance by individual contracting parties with a view to determine the facts and causes of the situation. And it promotes compliance and addresses the causes of non-compliance by providing to parties advice and non-binding recommendations. Finally, it considers the request of the meeting of the contracting parties, general issues of compliance under the Barcelona Convention and its protocols. The idea to take away is that the Compliance Committee is a non-judicial body which has as its chief objective to facilitate and promote compliance with the Barcelona Convention and its protocols. Next slide, please. So, how does the Compliance Committee work? And how its compliance action can be triggered? This can be triggered by the parties, by the Secretariat, or by the committee itself. For example, a party can trigger the mechanism as to its own actual or potential situation of non-compliance. A second way is a party trigger the process as regards the situation of non-compliance of another contracting party. A third way is that the Secretariat and therefore the Compliance Committee trigger the process on the basis of information submitted in national implementation reports or communications from the public subject to the meeting of a number of criteria. So, regarding the last point, the Barcelona Convention has been a pioneer among regional sees of UNEP in articulating an avenue for civil society participation in environmental treaty compliance through the process of the committee triggering the process of work following information received by civil society. We can move to the next slide now. Now, what are the measures taken by the Compliance Committee when it comes to non-compliance? These are measures which reflect the advisory and facilitative nature of the committee, and they are to give advice and, as appropriate, facilitate assistance, to invite and or assist the party concerned to draw up a plan of action, invite the party concerned to submit progress reports, or make recommendations on cases of non-compliance to the meeting of the contracting party. We can move to the next slide. And before moving to the overall findings in the Mediterranean region, it's nice to put the global context. You can see here some information from the first ever environmental rule of law report published in 2019 by UNEP, which highlights two main trends. The first one is that environmental law has blossomed since 1972, after also the Stockholm Conference on Environment. Secondly, there has been a dramatic growth of environmental institutions. The above also apply to the Mediterranean region, as we can also see from the national implementation reports submitted by the contracting parties. We can move to the next slide now. So this is an overview of the status of reporting by the 22 contracting parties in the period 2008 to 2017, since the Compliance Committee has started its work. In 2008, the first reporting format was implemented, and following its review, in 2017, a revised reporting format has been used, which is also now online. Contracting parties are now still submitting their national implementation reports for the last biennium, the biennium 2018-2019. So far, 18 contracting parties have submitted the reports to the convention or to the one of the protocols. And we can move to the next slide, please. The reporting rate for implementation is 100% so far, meaning that the contracting parties have put in place the legal and institutional framework to implement the Barcelona Convention. In more detail, this is where the Compliance Committee comes into the scene. On the basis of the national implementation reports, the Compliance Committee provides the contracting parties the meeting of the contracting parties that takes place every 2 years with key information for them to review the implementation of the Barcelona Convention, its protocols, and to take appropriate action. And this information comes in an aggregated manner. We try to see what are the main issues faced by groups of contracting parties, by most of contracting parties, to try to find the remediative measures. So, for instance, one of the key findings resulting from the current cycle, from the 2018-2019 implementation reports, and brought to the attention of COP22 that will take place in Antalya in Turkey at the end of this year, is that the promotion of the research on access to and transfer of environmental sound technologies, including clean production technologies, needs to be further reinforced. So based on the analysis of the national implementation reports, the Compliance Committee brings to the attention of the contracting parties general compliance issues for the meeting of the contracting parties to consider. And this is particularly important when it comes to assist contracting parties in overcoming the difficulties reported in implementation and articulating with the MAP components, the regional activity centers, which are experts in different sectors, the practical means and ways to support the contracting parties. For example, through development of technical guidance, material, online courses, etc. So, and provide capacity building activities. Usually the type of barriers that are referred here, for financial barriers, we interpret limited financial resources to undertake work, for the drafting of necessary legal and regulatory frameworks to put into place the Barcelona Convention, or for example, limited access to adequate funding for monitoring, for collecting and for storing data, etc. Administrative management difficulties are, for example, the fragmentation of roles and responsibilities amongst government ministries, departments and agencies, or central, regional, and local authorities, which makes challenging the collection of information and data from entities. Policy and legislative issues are understood to include, for instance, the absence of adequate legal and institutional frameworks or limited staff trained in the implementation and enforcement of legislation. Finally, technical and guidance capabilities include limited scientific and technical expertise in implementation and enforcement. So all these are challenges that can be found through the national implementation force, examined by the committee, and try to find ways to assist the contracting parties in overcoming them, including through capacity building.
Ilias, you have 1 minute to wrap up, please.
Thank you very much. We can move to the next slide, which I think I forgot to tell you. And I think we are almost there now, and we can move to the next slide, which is the final one. So, looking ahead, to continue building synergies and reinforcing capacity building activities, this is the aim, and it has three strands. First of all, ratification. Increase ratification rates of the protocols, the Barcelona Convention. The second one is reporting. Continue to give advice on streamlining reporting with the double aim. First one is to avoid duplication of reporting, because we know that our contracting parties have to report to several bodies, UN or non-UN, and also to help increase the submission rate of national reports. And finally, compliance, and continue refining the analysis of the national implementation reports based on objective criteria that the Compliance Committee has adopted on submission, completeness, and implementation. And finally, to support the contracting parties in implementing the Barcelona Convention and its protocols. And with this, I came to the end of my presentation, and thank you very much.